Tonight, you are listening to a collection of Zen sleeping stories inspired by Buddhist wisdom, centered on one gentle understanding: how anger arises and how it can fade when it is no longer carried. In the Buddhist tradition, anger is not treated as an enemy to fight or a flaw to remove. It is understood as something that appears when conditions are present and disappears when those conditions are no longer fed. These stories are not here to teach that idea directly. They are here to let it unfold quietly through simple moments and ordinary lives. This video contains 7 stories. Each story approaches anger in a different way, not with force, not with argument, but with softness and space. You do not need to listen closely. You do not need to remember anything. If your attention drifts, that is natural. If sleep arrives early, that is welcome. Each story will begin by gently naming its title, so you always know where you are, even as rest deepens. Now we begin the first story. This story is called The Gift That Was Never Accepted. In a town shaped by narrow streets and slow routines, there lived a man named Saran. He was known as someone who spoke carefully and worked honestly. He was not admired for brilliance or strength, but for reliability. When something needed to be done, Saran did it without complaint. Yet beneath his steady manner, there was a weight he carried quietly. Saran had a neighbor named Tavo, whose presence felt sharp against him. Tavo spoke loudly, judged quickly, and rarely missed an opportunity to criticize. When something went wrong in the street, Tavo found someone to blame. Often that someone was Saran. At first, Saran ignored it. He told himself that words were only sounds, that they passed quickly, that they did not need to be taken seriously. But over time, the words accumulated. They lingered longer than he expected. They replayed themselves in his thoughts when the street was quiet. Saran felt anger begin to take shape. It did not arrive all at once. It grew slowly, like heat building beneath the surface. He noticed it in the tightening of his jaw, the clenching of his hands, the restless way his thoughts returned to old conversations. He told no one. In the evenings, Saran often walked beyond the town to a small clearing where a few trees stood apart from the rest. It was a place people passed through without stopping, but Saran found it calming. One night, as the sky darkened, he sat beneath a tree and listened to his thoughts. They were loud. He replayed Tavo's words again and again, each time feeling the same heat rise in his chest. He imagined responses he had not spoken. He imagined confrontations that never happened. The anger felt justified, even necessary, as though holding onto it might protect him. But it did not rest. The more he held it, the heavier it became. One afternoon, a wandering monk arrived in the town. He carried nothing but a simple bowl and wore robes faded by time. He stayed only a short while, speaking little, observing much. Saran noticed him sitting near the well one evening, watching the water settle after someone had drawn from it. Without planning to, Saran sat nearby. They did not speak at first. After a long pause, the monk said gently, "You seem tired." Saran almost laughed. He was not physically tired. His work was manageable. His sleep was regular. And yet, the words felt true. "I am," he said quietly, surprising himself. The monk nodded as if this required no explanation. After another pause, Saran spoke again. "There is someone who angers me. I try not to feel it, but it comes anyway." The monk listened without reacting. He did not offer advice. He did not ask for details. Instead, he said, "May I tell you a short story?" Saran nodded. The monk said, "If someone comes to your door and offers you a gift, but you do not take it, where does the gift remain?" Saran thought for a moment. "With the person who offered it." The monk smiled gently. "So it is with anger." Saran frowned slightly. The words were simple, almost too simple. He did not argue, but something inside him resisted. The anger he felt did not seem like a gift he could simply refuse. It felt real, justified, earned. The monk did not press the point. He rose, bowed lightly, and left the town the next morning without further explanation. Saran returned to his routines. Days passed. Tavo continued to speak sharply. The street continued its quiet rhythm. Nothing outwardly changed, but the monk's words lingered in Saran's mind, returning at unexpected moments. "If someone offers you a gift and you do not take it." One morning, Tavo confronted Saran loudly over a small matter that had little to do with him. The words came fast and sharp. Others stopped to listen. Saran felt the familiar heat rise. But this time, something was different. He noticed the anger as it formed, not judged it, not suppressed it, just noticed it, like noticing a sound in the distance. He said nothing. Tavo continued for a moment, then stopped, unsettled by the lack of response. With no argument to push against, his words fell awkwardly into the space between them. He muttered something and walked away. Saran stood there, heart beating quickly. The anger was still present. It had not vanished, but it had not been fed. Later that evening, Saran walked to the clearing again. He sat beneath the same tree and watched the sky deepen into night. He noticed that the anger, which once felt solid and justified, now felt more like a movement passing through him. It came, stayed briefly, and softened when left alone. He realized something quietly. The anger had always required his participation. Each time he replayed the words, imagined responses, or tightened around the feeling, he accepted the gift. He carried it home. He kept it alive. When he did not take it, it had nowhere to stay. This did not mean the words stopped. It did not mean hurt never arose. It meant something subtler. It meant the anger no longer owned him. In the weeks that followed, Saran practiced this without calling it practice. When sharp words came his way, he noticed the impulse to grasp them. Sometimes he failed and felt anger fully. Sometimes he succeeded and felt it fade quickly. He did not judge either outcome. He simply observed. One evening, he noticed something unexpected. Without his resistance, Tavo's words seemed less powerful. They still carried sound, but less weight. Without a reaction to meet, they lost momentum. Eventually, Tavo spoke less to him. Not because Saran had changed Tavo, but because the exchange no longer offered what it once had. Anger, Saran realized, is a shared creation. It needs two hands to stay alive, one to offer it, one to receive it. As months passed, the memory of the monk softened. Saran did not hold on to the story as a rule or belief. He let it rest, the way one lets a tool rest when it is no longer needed. Sometimes anger still arose. When it did, he noticed it the way one notices a visitor at the door. He did not always refuse it, but he learned he had a choice. That choice brought space, and in that space, rest became possible. As this story settles, there is nothing you need to take from it. Like the gift in the story, these words do not need to be accepted. If they pass through and leave, that is enough. The next story will come gently when it is time. This second story is called The Burning Coal. In a village surrounded by low hills and quiet farmland, there lived a man named Jiran, who was known for his sense of fairness. He believed deeply in right and wrong. When something felt unjust, he noticed it immediately. When words were careless or actions were unkind, they stayed with him long after the moment had passed. Jiran told himself this was a good thing. He believed that holding on to anger meant he cared, that it showed strength, awareness, and moral clarity. Letting go felt to him like allowing harm to go unanswered. And so, when anger arose, he held it tightly. One afternoon, an argument broke out in the marketplace. It began over something small, a misunderstanding about payment, a misheard word. Voices rose. People gathered. In the end, the argument ended without resolution. But Jiran walked away carrying something heavy inside him. He replayed the exchange again and again. Each time the anger sharpened. Each time he felt more certain he was right. That evening, he returned home restless and unsettled. His body was tired, but his mind refused to rest. The anger felt warm, almost hot, as if it were radiating from his chest outward. He did not notice how tightly his hands were clenched until his fingers began to ache. The next morning, Jiran went to see an elderly teacher who lived just beyond the village. The teacher was not known for long explanations. People visited him, mostly because being near him made things feel less heavy. Jiran sat across from the teacher and spoke quickly, his words spilling out before he could slow them. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked. "When anger is justified, when someone is clearly wrong?" The teacher listened quietly. He did not interrupt. When Jiran finished, the teacher looked down and picked up a small piece of charcoal from beside the fire pit. He held it in his hand. "Tell me," the teacher said calmly, "what will happen if I keep holding this?" Jiran hesitated. "It will burn you." The teacher nodded. "And if I throw it at someone else?" "It may burn them too," Jiran replied. The teacher opened his hand slightly, allowing Jiran to see the blackened piece of coal resting against his skin. "But who is burned first?" Jiran did not answer right away. The teacher placed the coal down and said nothing more. Jiran left feeling unsatisfied. The story felt too simple, too neat. His anger did not feel like a piece of coal he could simply drop. It felt earned, necessary. Days passed. The anger did not leave. It followed him through his routines. It appeared in his thoughts while he worked. It whispered to him while he tried to sleep. He noticed something else too. The anger was not steady. Sometimes it flared brightly. Sometimes it cooled slightly. But each time he returned to the memory of the argument, it heated again. Each time he imagined saying the right words or proving his point, the heat returned. Without realizing it, Jiran was feeding it. One afternoon, while working in the fields, he accidentally burned his hand on a hot tool left too close to the fire. The pain was immediate and sharp. He dropped the tool instinctively. Later that evening, as he wrapped his hand, the memory of the teacher returned to him. The burning coal. He realized something quietly. He had not needed to think about whether to drop the hot tool. His body had known immediately. Pain did not require explanation. Anger, however, was different. Anger asked to be held. It offered reasons. It offered stories. It offered the promise of justice or satisfaction. But it burned all the same. The next time Jiran felt anger rise, he noticed it more carefully. He felt the warmth in his chest, the tightness in his jaw. Instead of immediately feeding it with thoughts, he paused, just for a moment. He did not push the anger away. He did not argue with it. He simply noticed how it felt in his body. It shifted, not dramatically, not completely, but enough for him to see that it was not fixed. Later, when the memory of the marketplace returned, he noticed the familiar urge to replay it. He let the thought arise, and then did not continue it. The anger softened sooner than expected. This did not mean he never felt angry again. There were days when the heat returned fully, days when he clung to it, believing he needed it to protect himself. But slowly, over time, he began to recognize a choice he had not seen before. He could hold the coal, or he could set it down. Setting it down did not mean agreeing with what had happened. It did not mean forgetting. It did not mean becoming passive. It meant not burning himself further. One evening, Jiran passed the teacher's home again. He did not stop to speak. He simply noticed the fire glowing quietly in the distance, warming the air without being touched. He understood then. Fire has its place. Warmth has its use. But holding burning coals in one's bare hands was never the way to use it. As weeks passed, Jiran found that his anger, when it arose, lasted for shorter periods. It came and went more quickly. It no longer defined entire days. He still cared about fairness. He still noticed injustice. But he no longer needed to carry the heat long after the moment had passed. The anger lost its authority, not because it was defeated, but because it was no longer obeyed. As this second story settles, there is nothing you need to do with it. Like the coal in the teacher's hand, it can be noticed, then set down. This third story is called The Second Arrow. In a place where the land opened wide and the sky felt close, there lived a woman named Kala. She was known for her resilience. People admired how she continued through difficulty without complaint. When trouble arrived, she did what needed to be done and moved on. At least, that was how it appeared. Inside, Kayla carried pain carefully, like something fragile she did not know how to set down. When life hurt her, she accepted the hurt. But what followed, the thoughts, the judgments, the tightening of the heart, stayed much longer than the original wound. Kayla believed this was simply how pain worked. One morning, while walking along a familiar path near her home, Carla slipped on loose stones and fell. The pain in her ankle was sharp and sudden. She sat for a moment, breathing through it, then stood slowly and made her way home. The injury healed within days, yet something else lingered. Each time she thought about the fall, her body tensed. She replayed the moment again and again. How careless she had been, how she should have noticed the stones, how foolish it felt to fall in such an ordinary way. The pain of the fall had passed. The pain of the remembering had not. Kayla did not question this. She assumed suffering naturally followed pain, like a shadow. Sometime later, a teacher came through her town and stayed for several nights. He did not announce himself or gather people intentionally. Those who wanted to listen found him sitting quietly beneath a tree at dusk. Kayla joined them one evening. The teacher spoke slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. He spoke about pain and suffering, but not in a way that demanded understanding. His words moved gently, leaving space between them. At one point, he said, "When we are struck by an arrow, pain arises. That pain is unavoidable." Kayla felt her attention sharpen. The teacher continued, "But often, we take a second arrow and strike ourselves again. With anger, with blame, with resistance. This second arrow is optional." Carla felt something stir inside her. After the gathering, she waited until others left, then approached the teacher. "I understand pain," she said, "but suffering feels unavoidable. How can it be optional?" The teacher looked at her kindly and gestured toward the ground beside him. "Sit," he said. They sat together in silence for a moment. "Tell me," the teacher said gently, "when you fell on the path, did the pain ask your permission?" "No," Carla replied. "And when you replay the fall in your mind," he asked, "does that pain arrive in the same way?" Kayla paused. "No," she said slowly. "It comes when I think about it." The teacher nodded. "That is the second arrow." Kayla left with the words echoing quietly inside her. Over the following days, she noticed how often she reached for that second arrow without realizing it. When something went wrong, she not only felt disappointment, she added judgment. When words hurt her, she not only felt pain, she added anger toward herself and others. Each time, the suffering multiplied. One afternoon, Carla was criticized unfairly by someone she respected. The words stung. Her chest tightened. The familiar rush of anger followed close behind. She paused. For the first time, she noticed the moment between the pain and the reaction. The first arrow had already landed. The second arrow was forming. She did nothing. She did not excuse the words. She did not justify them. She did not push the pain away. She simply felt it. The pain rose, stayed briefly, and began to soften. The anger did not follow. Carla was surprised. She realized that the pain itself was not the part that overwhelmed her. It was what she added to it. The stories, the resistance, the tightening grip of thought. This did not mean she never reached for the second arrow again. There were days when she did it without noticing. Days when anger flared and stayed longer than she wanted. But now, something had changed. She could see it happening. And sometimes, seeing was enough. As weeks passed, Carla noticed subtle shifts in her daily life. When discomfort arose, she allowed it to exist without immediately explaining it. When disappointment appeared, she felt it without feeding it. The pain still came, but it did not stay as long. She began to understand that pain was part of living, sharp, sudden, and honest. Suffering, however, required participation. It needed attention, repetition, and resistance. Without those, it weakened. One evening, Carla returned to the path where she had fallen. She walked slowly, noticing the stones beneath her feet. They were the same as before, uneven, ordinary, neither kind nor cruel. She felt no resentment toward them. The fall had been real. The pain had been real. But the story she had carried afterward had not been necessary. She smiled quietly and continued walking. Over time, Kayla became gentler with herself and others. When someone reacted with anger, she recognized the second arrow forming in them. She did not take it personally. When she herself felt anger rise, she noticed whether it was pain or something added afterward. Often, it was the latter. She did not become immune to hurt. She did not become calm in every moment, but she suffered less. The teacher eventually left town, as teachers do. His words faded from conversation, but the understanding remained, alive in small moments. When Kayla later spoke of it, she did not quote teachings or explain ideas. She said only, "Some pain cannot be avoided, but we do not need to make it worse." As this third story settles, you do not need to remember arrows or lessons. Like all things, pain and thought arise and pass on their own. His fourth story is called The Mirror Covered in Dust. In a quiet town where the days unfolded without hurry, there lived a craftsman named Arun, who was known for making mirrors. His workshop sat at the end of a narrow lane, its door usually open to the light. Inside, mirrors of many sizes leaned carefully against the walls, their surfaces catching fragments of the world and returning them without judgment. Arun's mirrors were not famous for ornament or decoration. They were valued for their clarity. People said that when they looked into one of his mirrors, they saw themselves exactly as they were, without distortion. Arun worked slowly. He cleaned each mirror with care, wiping away the smallest marks before allowing it to leave his hands. He believed that a mirror's task was simple, to reflect what stood before it, nothing more. Yet in his own home, Arun kept one mirror he never sold. It hung on the wall near the door, where he passed it many times a day. Over the years, dust had gathered on its surface. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint dullness that softened reflections slightly. Arun saw it, but never stopped to clean it. There was always something else to do. As time passed, the dust thickened. The mirror still reflected, but not clearly. Faces appeared blurred, light dulled. Details faded into vague shapes. Arun noticed this too. When he looked into the mirror, he often felt dissatisfied. He thought he looked tired. He thought his expressions seemed harsh. He wondered when he had grown so stern. He did not realize that the mirror was no longer clean. One afternoon, Arun argued with a customer who accused him unfairly of careless work. The words were sharp. Voices rose. The customer left angrily, and Arun stood alone in his workshop, heart racing. Anger settled into him like grit. That evening, When he returned home, he passed the dusty mirror and caught his reflection. His face looked tense and unfamiliar. His eyes seemed narrow, his mouth drawn tight. He felt another wave of anger rise. "See what they have done to me," he thought. "See how others make me this way." The mirror remained silent. Over the next few days, similar moments followed. Small frustrations at work, harsh words overheard in the street, minor mistakes that felt larger than they were. Each time, Aaron looked into the mirror and felt displeased with what he saw. The reflections seemed to confirm his thoughts. One morning, a traveling cleaner arrived in the town. She offered her services simply, sweeping floors, wiping windows, clearing dust from forgotten corners. When she passed Aaron's workshop, she paused. "You make beautiful mirrors," she said. Aaron nodded politely. "But that one at your home," she added gently, "is very dusty." Aaron felt a flicker of irritation. "It still works," he replied. "I see myself well enough." The cleaner smiled without disagreement. "May I clean it for you?" she asked. Aaron hesitated. The offer felt unnecessary, yet something in her calm manner softened his resistance. He agreed. That afternoon, the cleaner came to his home. She stood before the mirror and wiped it slowly, her movements steady and unhurried. Dust lifted easily, revealing a surface that had not changed beneath it. When she finished, the mirror shone quietly. Aaron stepped closer. The reflection startled him. His face looked the same, yet different. His eyes appeared open rather than narrow. His mouth rested more naturally. The sternness he had grown used to seeing was gone. He felt confused. "I look lighter," he said. The cleaner nodded. "The mirror did not change you," she replied. "It only stopped adding dust." Aaron stood silently, something shifting inside him. In the days that followed, he noticed how often anger had acted like dust on his perception. Each time he held on to resentment, replayed words, or tightened around blame, the world appeared harsher. Faces looked unfriendly. Situations seemed heavy. But when he allowed anger to pass without feeding it, things looked different. Not perfect, not always pleasant, but clearer. He began cleaning the mirror regularly. As he did, he noticed something else. The clarity did not belong to the mirror alone. When the mirror was clean, he also felt less burdened. His reactions softened, his thoughts slowed. One evening, a customer returned to apologize for their earlier words. Aaron listened without holding on to the past exchange. The anger did not return. It had nowhere to settle. Another day, someone spoke sharply to him in the street. Aaron felt the first stir of irritation, then noticed it and let it move on. Later, when he looked into the mirror, his face remained calm. The mirror reflected what was present, not what was remembered. Aaron realized then that anger had not changed the world. It had changed how he saw it. Like dust on glass, it blurred perception without announcing itself. Removing it did not require force. It required care. From that time on, Aaron treated anger differently. When it arose, he did not argue with it. He did not shame himself for feeling it. He simply noticed how quickly it clouded things. And often, noticing was enough for it to settle. People continued to admire his mirrors. Some said they seemed clearer than ever. Arun smiled at this, but did not explain. He knew that clarity does not come from adding more light. It comes from removing what covers it. The mirror at his door stayed clean, not obsessively, but attentively. When dust gathered, it was wiped away gently. Anger still visited at times. When it did, Arun remembered the mirror. He remembered that what he saw was not always what was there. He remembered to clean rather than react. As this fourth story settles, you do not need to remember mirrors or dust. Like the mirror, the mind reflects what touches it. When agitation passes, clarity returns on its own. This fifth story is called The Man Who Shouted at the River. Near a wide bend of a river that moved steadily toward the sea, there lived a man named Oren. His house stood close enough to the water that he could hear it at night, especially when the current grew strong after rain. The river had always been there, long before Oren arrived, and it continued to move with the same patient rhythm year after year. Oren believed. He understood the river. He knew where it flooded in spring, where it narrowed in summer, where stones hid just beneath the surface. He respected its power, but he also felt a quiet resentment toward it. The river shaped his days whether he wanted it to or not. It determined when fields could be planted, when paths were passable, when travel was safe. And when the river disrupted his plans, anger followed. One season, heavy rains arrived earlier than expected. The river rose quickly, spreading across low ground and swallowing a path Oren used daily. What had been a short walk became a long detour. Each morning, he stood at the river's edge, staring at the water that blocked his way. "This should not be happening," he muttered. At first, his frustration was mild. He adapted, took the longer route, and told himself it would pass. But days went by, and the water remained high. Each morning, Oren's irritation grew sharper. He began to speak to the river. At first, the words were quiet, complaints spoken under his breath. Then they grew louder, accusations, demands. He stood at the riverbank and shouted about the inconvenience, the unfairness, the waste of time. The river did not respond. Its surface continued to ripple and flow, reflecting sky and cloud without pause. It did not rise or fall because of Oren's words. It did not speed up or slow down. This only made Oren angrier. He returned home each day carrying the river inside him, its resistance, its refusal to change. His sleep grew shallow. His thoughts returned again and again to the same complaint. Why won't it move? One afternoon, while Oren was shouting at the river more loudly than usual, an old fisherman passed by. The fisherman stopped a short distance away and watched without comment. When Oren finished breathing hard, the fisherman said gently, "You seem tired." Oren turned sharply. "Wouldn't you be? This river blocks my way every day." The fisherman nodded. "It blocks your path," he said, "but it does not block your breath." Oren frowned. The words felt irrelevant, even dismissive. "Easy for you to say," he replied. "You don't have to walk where I walk." The fisherman did not argue. He simply sat on a nearby stone and cast his line into the water. They stood in silence for a while. Oren watched the fisherman, noticing how calmly he waited, how his body did not tense even as the current tugged at the line. The fisherman seemed to move with the river rather than against it. Eventually, Oren spoke again. "How can you be so calm when it does whatever it wants?" The fisherman smiled slightly. "Because it has always done whatever it wants." That night, Oren lay awake, listening to the river's distant sound. It moved the same way it always had, steady and indifferent. For the first time, he noticed how much energy he had spent arguing with it, not aloud, but inside his own mind. The argument had never been answered. The next morning, Oren returned to the riverbank. The water still covered the path. The current still moved steadily. Nothing had changed. He felt the familiar rise of anger, the tightening in his chest, the heat behind his eyes. This time, he noticed it as it formed. He did not shout. He stood quietly, watching the water move around stones, around fallen branches, around whatever lay in its path. The river did not push through obstacles aggressively. It flowed around them, adjusting its shape without complaint. Oren felt something soften. The river was not blocking him. It was simply being a river. This realization did not bring sudden peace. His anger did not disappear completely, but it shifted slightly, losing some of its sharp edge. Over the following days, Oren began to notice how often his anger arose, not from what was happening, but from how strongly he believed it should not be happening. Each time reality differed from his expectation, resistance followed. The river became a daily teacher, though it did not try to teach. One morning, Oren took a different approach. Instead of standing at the blocked path, he sat on the bank and watched. He noticed how sunlight danced on the surface. He noticed how birds skimmed the water without concern. He noticed how the river carried small branches gently, not clinging to any of them. Time passed differently that morning. The detour still existed. The inconvenience remained. But the anger felt lighter, less demanding. Weeks later, the water receded. The path reappeared, unchanged beneath the surface. Oren crossed it again as he always had. He noticed something surprising. The relief he expected did not come. The anger he had carried for weeks had already loosened. The river, returning to its old shape, felt ordinary, not triumphant. Oren realized then that his anger had not been about the river at all. It had been about control. He had wanted the world to move according to his needs, his schedule, his expectations. When it did not, he shouted, not because the river was wrong, but because he felt powerless. Seeing this did not make him weak. It made him honest. From then on, when things did not go as planned, Oren noticed the familiar urge to shout, sometimes outwardly, often inwardly. He did not suppress it. He simply saw it. Sometimes the anger passed quickly. Sometimes it stayed longer. But it no longer convinced him that it was necessary. The fishermen passed by many times after that. They nodded to each other, sharing quiet acknowledgement without conversation. The river continued to flow, indifferent and generous at the same time. Oren's life did not become free of obstacles. Paths flooded again in other seasons. Plans changed. Effort was still required. But something essential had shifted. he stopped shouting at the river. When anger arose, he asked himself gently, "What am I demanding to control?" Often, that question was enough. The river never offered answers. It never needed to. It moved, as it always had, carrying water toward the sea without argument. As this fifth story settles, there is nothing you need to agree with or remember. Like the river, events move on their own time. Resistance adds weight. Allowing does not. This sixth story is called "The Knot That Loosened When Untouched." In a small village where paths crossed gently and names were spoken softly, there lived a woman named Annika, who was known for her patience. People often said she had a calm presence, someone who could be trusted with delicate matters. When others felt overwhelmed, they came to her for steadiness. Yet there was one thing Annika struggled to release. Whenever conflict arose, she felt an urge to fix it immediately. If words were spoken sharply, she replayed them. If misunderstandings appeared, she worked them over and over in her mind, searching for the right response that might untangle everything. She believed effort was kindness. When anger appeared, her own or someone else's, she tried to loosen it by force. She explained, reasoned, corrected, and apologized, sometimes all at once. And yet, the more she worked at it, the tighter everything seemed to become. One afternoon, while cleaning a storage room behind her house, Annika found a length of rope tangled into a tight knot. It had been left there long ago, perhaps from an old repair. She picked it up, expecting it to come apart easily. It did not. She pulled at one end, then another. The knot tightened. She tried turning it, bending it, coaxing it open with her fingers. The rope resisted every attempt. Frustration rose quickly. She pulled harder. The knot only grew smaller and firmer, as if it were responding to her effort by defending itself. Annika dropped the rope and sighed. She noticed how familiar the feeling was. Later that evening, a disagreement arose between two neighbors she cared about. Harsh words were exchanged, and both came to Annika, asking her to help settle things. She listened carefully, offering thoughtful words, trying to guide them toward understanding. But the tension did not ease. The more she spoke, the more defensive each became. Voices tightened, expressions hardened. Annika felt the familiar pressure in her chest, the sense that if she did not fix this now, something would be lost. She tried again. It did not help. That night, Annika sat alone in her room, thinking of the rope. The knot had not loosened when she pulled at it. It had only tightened. She felt a quiet recognition. The next morning, she returned to the rope. This time, she did not pull. She placed it gently on the table and looked at it closely. She traced its path with her eyes, noticing where it crossed over itself, where it curved back, where it held tension. She did nothing else. After a while, she gently shifted one small loop, not pulling, just easing it slightly. The rope responded. A bit of space appeared. Another small movement followed, then another. The knot began to loosen on its own. Annika felt something soften inside her. Later that day, she encountered one of the neighbors again. The tension from the night before was still there, but less sharp. Annika listened without interrupting. She did not explain. She did not correct. She allowed pauses to remain. Something changed. Without resistance to push against, The words slowed. The anger lost momentum. What had felt tight began to loosen. This did not mean the conflict vanished. It meant it stopped tightening. Over the next weeks, Annika noticed how often anger behaved like a knot. The more she tried to control it, the more it resisted. The more she allowed it space, the more it shifted naturally. She began to practice something new, though she did not call it practice. When anger appeared, she did not rush to untangle it. She noticed its shape. She allowed it to be seen. She waited. Sometimes it loosened quickly. Sometimes it took time. Sometimes it remained knotted for a while. She learned not to force any outcome. One evening, she found herself caught in her own anger after being misunderstood by someone she trusted. The familiar urge to explain rose quickly. She felt the tightening begin. She paused. She imagined the rope on the table. She let the feeling exist without pulling at it. The anger shifted, not disappearing, but softening. The urgency faded. Space returned. Annika realized then that release did not always come from action. Sometimes it came from restraint, from not adding effort to what was already tight. People noticed changes in her, though they could not name them. She spoke less in moments of tension. She listened more. She no longer hurried toward resolution. Conflicts around her still arose. Emotions still appeared, but they did not spiral as quickly. The knot, once touched gently, seemed to remember how to loosen itself. Years later, Annika found the rope again. It lay neatly coiled, free of knots. She smiled, not because it was fixed, but because she understood something she had not understood before. Some things cannot be forced open. Some things loosen only when allowed. As this sixth story settles, there is nothing you need to untangle. Like the knot in the rope, anger tightens when pulled and softens when given space. This seventh story is called When the Heart No Longer Needed to Defend. There was a time when a man named Rima believed that anger was what kept him safe. He did not think of it this way in words. He simply felt it in his body, the way his chest tightened when someone disagreed with him, the way his thoughts sharpened when he felt misunderstood, the way his voice rose slightly whenever he sensed threat, even in small moments. Anger arrived quickly for Rama, like a shield lifting before he had time to decide. He had learned this early in life. When he was young, he had been overlooked often. His needs were not always seen. His words were not always heard. And so, somewhere along the way, his body learned a quiet rule. If I become angry first, I will not be hurt. This rule stayed with him into adulthood. Rama was not unkind. He helped when asked. He worked diligently. He cared deeply about fairness. Yet beneath these qualities lived a constant readiness, a subtle guarding of the heart. He did not rest easily. When conversations grew tense, his mind raced ahead, preparing responses. When silence followed disagreement, his thoughts filled the gap with imagined judgments. Even when nothing was wrong, his body remained alert, as if danger might arrive at any moment. Anger was never far. One evening, after a particularly difficult exchange with someone he cared about, Rima walked beyond the town and sat near an old stone wall that marked the edge of a field. The sun had already lowered, and the air felt cool against his skin. He felt exhausted. not from the argument itself, but from the effort of holding himself together afterward. His body felt tight. His breathing was shallow. His thoughts repeated the same phrases over and over, each time sharpening them further. He rested his head in his hands. "I'm tired of being like this," he whispered to no one. The words surprised him. They were not angry words. They were honest ones. As he sat there, an elderly woman approached slowly along the path. She carried a small bundle of firewood balanced carefully in her arms. When she reached the wall, she paused and rested the bundle beside her. "You look burdened," she said gently. Rayma did not respond at first. He did not feel like explaining himself. The woman did not press. She sat on the wall at a short distance, gazing across the field. The quiet between them felt wide, but not uncomfortable. After a while, Rayma spoke. "I feel like I'm always defending myself," he said, "even when no one is attacking." The woman nodded as if this made sense. "Defense can become a habit," she replied, "especially when it once protected us." Rayma felt something loosen slightly at her words. "How do you stop?" he asked. "How do you stop reacting before you even know what's happening?" The woman looked at him with calm eyes. "You don't stop at first," she said. "You notice." Rayma frowned. "Notice what?" She gestured lightly toward his chest. "Notice what you're protecting." Rayma sat with that. He noticed the tightness in his body. He noticed how quickly his mind leapt to justification. He noticed how anger arrived before he could name the feeling underneath it. And beneath it, he felt something quieter. Fear. Not fear of danger, but fear of being unseen. Fear of being dismissed. Fear of being small. The realization did not overwhelm him. It settled gently, like something he had always known, but never named. The woman stood, gathered her firewood, and prepared to leave. "One more thing," she said. "When the heart feels safe, it no longer needs armor." She walked on without waiting for a reply. Rayma remained by the wall long after she left. In the days that followed, he carried her words with him, not as a rule, but as a question. What am I protecting right now? The next time anger rose, he asked it quietly. The anger did not disappear, but it slowed. He noticed that beneath it lived a feeling of vulnerability, a desire to be understood, a wish not to be dismissed. The anger had been speaking on behalf of something more tender. Seeing this changed how he related to it. When anger arose, he did not push it away. He did not justify it. He listened beneath it. Sometimes the anger softened quickly. Sometimes it lingered. Sometimes it returned again and again. But it no longer felt like an enemy or a command. It felt like a signal. Over time, Rayma began to respond differently in moments of tension. When conversations grew sharp, he paused before speaking, not to calculate a better defense, but to feel what was happening inside him. Often, what he felt was a wish to be safe. That wish did not require anger to be honored. He began speaking more slowly, listening more fully, allowing silence to exist without filling it immediately. These changes were subtle. Most people did not notice them, but Raymer did. He noticed that his body rested more easily. His sleep deepened. His thoughts did not circle as tightly around old wounds. One afternoon, someone spoke harshly to him, unfairly accusing him of something he had not done. The familiar surge of anger appeared, the tightening, the heat. Raymer felt it, and beneath it, he felt the urge to defend himself at all costs. He paused. He spoke calmly, stating what was true without accusation. He did not add sharpness. He did not withdraw. The conversation ended without resolution, but Raymer did not carry it home. Later that evening, he realized something remarkable. The anger had not followed him. It had arisen, been felt, and then faded, like a wave that does not need to be chased or held. He understood then that anger had never been the problem. The problem had been the belief that he was always under threat. As that belief softened, the need for defense softened with it. This did not make Raymer passive. He still spoke when boundaries were crossed. He still stood for fairness. But his actions came from clarity rather than reaction. The heart no longer needed to armor itself. It could remain open without being unprotected. Years later, when asked what had changed him, Raymer did not speak of teachings or practices. He said simply, "I learned that anger was trying to help me. Once I listened to what it was protecting, I didn't need it as much." As this final story settles, there is nothing more to understand or remember. Anger arises when the heart feels threatened. When the heart feels safe, anger rests. You do not need to make that happen. You do not need to force safety. Sometimes noticing is enough. Thank you for listening, whether awake or asleep. Thank you for allowing these stories to unfold in their own time. There is nothing more to do now. The night can carry you the rest of the way.